So this is Elizabeth Saunders. And Elizabeth, I know that some folks are going to be asking the question, what is a time management coach and how did you get started? And so if you want to answer those questions and dive right in, we'd love to have that.
That sounds great. Yeah, I told Lynette we should just get those questions answered up front because typically everyone's thinking that, so we might as well just get that out of the way before we get into the other materials. So, in terms of being a time management coach, at least what that means in my world is I help people with the process of lasting behavioral change. And I saw a need for this because so I started doing time management coaching in 2009, so over 13 years ago. And at that point, time management was primarily taught through training. So it was like someone comes into your organization, is there for an hour, maybe half a day, and they're like, okay, these are all these awesome things you can do. And if you do all these awesome things, your life will be perfect. And then they leave. And then everyone just goes back to doing what they were doing before because it's really hard to make these kinds of changes. And so that was kind of the model that was there at the time. And I saw an opportunity. I'll go into my story later, but to help people in the process of change. And I really found that for people that really struggled in this area, that it usually takes at least 3 months of having some kind of support for them to make the changes, not only know what to do, but integrate them into their lives, and then also work on building resilience. So that's the whole thing. If you get off track, how do you get back on track as quickly as possible? So that's in a nutshell what time management coaching looks like. I have group programs as well as work one-on-one with people all over the world. And then in terms of how I became a time management coach, it really came through solving my own problems. So I began my first business in 2005 and I fell into that. I was doing writing, editing, and photo styling for magazines, marketing companies, and marketing divisions within corporations. I was really excited that I had a business that was working and I hadn't expected to start a business. So I was particularly excited that it had worked out, but I had no work-life balance. I pretty much, whenever I wasn't sleeping or with people, I felt like I should be working, whether it was at night or on the weekends or at really any time. And so after a few years of this, I decided enough was enough. Even though in some ways I was very successful with having lots of clients and being able to support myself and all of that, I didn't feel successful if I felt like I could never stop working without feeling guilty. And so what I did is I just started working on my own life, figuring out how to not work at night, not work on the weekends, to set boundaries and just get more balanced. And my entrepreneur friends are like, this is amazing. We are successful, but we're stressed out all the time. You should really help other people. So, again, it wasn't really my idea to become a time management coach, but people recognizing something I had done in my life and saw an opportunity for me to help others. So, that's how I started in 2009 with being a small part of my business. And then over the years, it's grown to the main thing I do. So, that's kind of in a nutshell what it means for me to be a time management coach as well as my story. So, there we go. And then, Lynette, is it okay if I just segue into our topic for tonight and moving forward? Okay,
Absolutely.
so I will do that. So there's so many different things we could talk about with time management. And as I said, a lot of times I work with people for at least 3 months, like 3 to 6 months. So we're not going to completely change your life in one evening. But what I thought would be helpful was to give you some basically different strategies and concepts to really think about if you're in a situation where you want to fit something into your life and you're not consistently doing that right now, to figure out kind of what's going on from a conceptual point of view, and then to drill down into the practical tactical strategies that you can take to really get this into your life. And some of you, your time management might be perfect, you're doing everything just right, and so then you'll just be giving us tips along the way about what you're doing perfectly. But a few people out there might have something that you want to fit in a little bit more, or you're struggling with, or you feel like it's falling through the cracks, or you just want to take to the next level. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, going from a more like conceptual level in terms of different ways to think about things down to the really tactical. So what we're going to start out with is something that I call a dynamic priorities model. And this is something I developed that I feel is the best way to understand the interrelated nature of our time. And what I want you to do, I'll show you a picture in a little bit to help illustrate this out of one of my books, but I just want you to start out by, excuse me, imagining infinity pool. So one of those like beautiful pools, maybe that you see in the Caribbean or some other hotel. And they're the pools where the water goes out all the way to the edge of the pool. And so when you step in or any sort of something disturbs it, the water will kind of fall over the edge when the water is displaced. So I want you to imagine that. I want you to imagine it like a circle. So you've got this circular infinity pool and the water can spill over the edge on any side. And then within that, I want you to imagine concentric circles. So at the center, we've got the smallest circle, and then moving out, we have circles that are a little bigger, each one surrounding it all the way out to the edge. And with the dynamic priorities model, what we're getting at and what this would look like with your life is that that outer ring of the infinity pool represents your 24 hours in a day, 7 days in the week. So that's the kind of the maximum amount of time available, just the limits of reality. And then each one of those rings inside the dynamic priorities model represents different parts of your life. So it could be your health, it could be your spiritual life, it could be work, it could be your volunteer service with Kiwanis, it could be working out, it could be family, friends, any of those different things that fill your life will be the different concentric circles representing those different ones. And what happens is that when we add anything new to our life, so like let's say you're taking on a new volunteer role, or like unfortunately maybe, I don't know, you did something to injure yourself and so now you have to go to physical therapy, or maybe you have more work or something else expands, what's going to happen is it's not just, that doesn't just happen in a vacuum where all of a sudden you have a new responsibility or expand a responsibility and nothing changes. Instead, it's this dynamic priorities model where when you add in a circle, or a circle expands, what's going to happen is by definition, those other circles are going to adjust. And they're either going to get skinnier, meaning you're investing less time there, or they just fall entirely over the edge. And all of a sudden, you're not investing any time in them at all. So you want to just be aware, kind of at a high level, if there's anything in your life right now where you're like, I used to be doing this and now I can't find time for it. Or, I really would like to find time for XYZ, but I just don't think there is any time right now. To be aware that what's going on is there's this interplay between your different priorities, which is very dynamic. And if you want to see something change, you're going to either need to take out some circles, add in some circles, or change basically the width of them, meaning how much time you're investing in each one. So that's the conceptual idea of what that looks like. And I'm going to show you a few images from my first book. I've written 3, but this is the 3 Secrets to Effective Time Investment. That's my first one. And so on page 77, and I don't know if, can you see it? That this is what it would look like kind of when it's static, meaning like you've got everything in maybe a balanced order. And then this image right here is where maybe you get sick. And so all of a sudden that health and wellness circle is a lot bigger. And then work has maybe gone completely outside of the circle and some of the other circles have narrowed. And then this would be kind of a different situation where, on the one I just showed you, the health and wellness circle was huge. And then over here, this might be where you have a big work project and all of a sudden the work circle is really wide and taking a lot of your time, and maybe health and wellness got really skinny. So this is just a way to think about what's going on. And when I talk to people about this concept, a lot of times what people realize is that maybe some of the things that are really important to them that they actually think should be core, like right at the center or like definitely within the circle, have completely fallen off the edge and they didn't realize it. So I want to give you just like a few seconds it doesn't have to be a long amount of time, but just to think like about that concept that I just shared, the dynamic priorities model, and then to reflect, like, do you feel like the circles you have within your overall infinity pool are the ones you want to have? Is anything falling off the edge that you really want to stay put inside your circles? Or is maybe something just a little too big or a little too skinny? It's not in the correct proportion. So I'm just gonna be quiet for just a little bit to let you guys think about that. And then I'll let Lynette moderate. But if we have a few people that would be willing to share your thoughts, and your thoughts could also be, I'm amazing, and it's all balanced perfectly. It's completely fine to say. Or if you're noticing that there's something you think should be in your circle that's not right now, we'd love for you to share. And that can just be something that we're going to talk about.
Elizabeth, can I start?
Sure, go for it.
So some of you all on the call know this, but my community service circle was getting smaller, and now it's getting bigger again. So my president-elect last year, when I was the president of my club, he has taken ill, and so I'm serving as president again this year in his absence. And so what I thought was going to be getting smaller is now either stayed the same or getting bigger. So I completely understand that whole dynamic priorities model and how things shift.
Yeah. And how have you consciously thought through what that means in terms of your expectations for other parts of your life? Because that can be part of the problem when we're like, oh, I thought this was going down. So then we start to create expectations like, I'm going to redo my basement, or I'm going to, go on a trip to Texas, or whatever that is. And then something changes. So have you thought through like what that means in terms of how much you can take on right now, or what's realistic?
I was planning to spend more time reading and more time working more on my business, my coaching business. We'll see how it turns out.
Okay.
The reading part
Yeah.
hasn't come to fruition. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And would
It'll be
anyone else be open to sharing just kind of where you see yourself at? Do you feel like you've got everything in there, or are there things maybe that are not quite in the balance you'd prefer? Yeah, Dennis, do you want to share?
Well, I think it's, the interesting thing about it is people look at it as being, I think, like you said, static. It stays still and doesn't move. But every morning you wake up, it's going to move.
Yeah, it's true.
And I don't care if you're retired or working. If you're working, it's a lot easier because generally you've got your day planned from the day before, and then maybe a couple of fires come in, but you can plan it. And in some cases, maybe not anybody on this call, but you could leave at 5 o'clock and it's done. Now, I've never had that example for many years, but the point is that we have to look at it every day. We just can't take it and say, this is the way it's going to be for the rest of our life.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one thing people look at when they look at how do I deal with time management, and expect it to be a one and out, and that's it. And that's, I'm speaking to a choir probably. That's the way I've seen it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's really a lifestyle. Like it's very similar, I would say, to uh, exercising regularly or keeping your house in order, any of that. You can't just like do one and done. Like, okay, I did time management. Now know that it's we constantly need to be thinking and adapting and adjusting. And you're right, even on a day-to-day basis, how much we weight certain circles could absolutely vary. And I see Jen's hand is raised. Would you be able to help her, Lynette?
Oh, I was gonna just speak when it was my turn.
Okay, yeah, feel free. It's all you.
Oh, I agree with Dennis on it changes day to day. I have a balance of Kiwanis, full-time job, and children. And in there I have to have, and I was just talking to someone about balance the other day, health balance. For me, like I cannot operate on very little sleep. So I started to realize, when I kept saying, I need to work a little bit more and I'll sleep a little bit less, or that sort of thing, that I would, that the lack of sleep was affecting my work and how I was parenting the next day. So for me, sleep is always, I have to have that certain amount or I'm not going to function the next day and be able to do all those other priorities for me. And, sometimes if I have work and Kiwanis and it's taken up a lot more on one day, then I know that I have to balance that out by making more about parenting the following day, making it up to them the following day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And just recognizing what are some of the non-negotiables. Like for you, it's like sleep needs to be at least this much. And I have to hold that in my schedule or everything else starts to fall apart. And then, like you said, balancing things out. So if you have one day that's really heavy on volunteering or work, having other days where you can be home more, available more. So that's great. And I see another person raise your hand.
Yeah, Pip.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was your
That's what
actual
everybody
name or
calls me
not.
is Pip.
So I was like, I see that there, but I don't want to make assumptions. Yeah,
It's actually Richard Pippin, but everybody calls me Pip.
got it.
No,
Perfect.
I mean, your example is very unique, and I can relate. Several years ago, especially when I was working. Fortunately, I'm not anymore. Well, that's not true. I am working, but at that time, I didn't know when to say no, especially with my volunteer opportunities and with my work opportunities, and then my family opportunities, and I kept saying yes when people were asking for me to do for certain volunteer opportunities, and I found it getting myself into some trouble, especially when my work took up so much of my time. But over the years, I've grown a little wiser, and of course, I'm retired now, and I've learned how to say no a lot more.
Good job.
And that means a lot to anybody who is out there trying to do work. You can only do so much and do it well.
Yep.
So just a word to the wise, to anybody. You can get yourself in trouble by saying yes too quickly.
I completely agree. I completely agree. That's definitely a word to the wise and important to do even in retirement. I've coached people in retirement, and I think sometimes, well, I know the more flexibility you have in your schedule, the better time management you need to have, because there's like, when you have less flexibility, it's like guardrails. It's like, okay, you have to show up for work at this time, or like you have to leave at this time, or to pick up the kids. And so you do have to have good time management, but a lot of it is like kind of like a structure imposed on you. But when you're retired, or let's say you own your own business and you have a lot of autonomy, you have to have so much stronger time management, because there's nothing saying you have to go to bed at this time, get up this time, and be here, do that. And so you can end up very overwhelmed if you're saying yes to everything, because time is still limited, even though you do have more time than you had when you were working. So I completely agree with you. Good thing. So great. I love all that you shared. And this goes along with this whole having the right thing stay within the infinity pool. Because like Pip shared, if you say yes to everything, it's like adding more and more circles, or making those circles wider, and something is going to start falling off the edge unconsciously that you didn't decide you wanted to fall off the edge. So we want to make conscious choices about what are those must-haves that we want in our schedule each day. And then what are those things, you know what? Yep, that's going to fall off the edge today, or it's going to fall off the edge during this entire season. I'm okay with that. Like, that's just my conscious choice. I decided on that, and it's going to be fine. So with that being said, the next step in terms of going from just conceptual down to a little more granular is something I call clarifying action-based priorities. And in my first book, The 3 Secrets to Effective Time Investment, I have a whole section on this. And the concept behind this is that what can happen to people is they can be pretty good at the fixed commitments that you can easily put in your calendar, and other people are depending on you to show up. So like whether it's showing up for work, or Kiwanis meeting, or you told your buddies you would golf with them, or whatever it is, like got it on your calendar, it's a time, you're there. So that tends to be a little easier for people to have in their schedule. But what can happen is some things that are very important to us that we do want to see happen on a regular basis, we keep them in the abstract so that they're not tangible enough to actually land in specific hours on our schedule. And then because of that, without us really meaning to, we can end up deprioritizing them, not because we don't want to, but because we get busy and other things squish it out because we didn't save the time for it. And so what this can look like, I just came up with a few examples I've got down on my sheet, is like, for example, one common one where this can happen is exercise. So exercise, this might sound weird when I first say it, but I'll explain. Exercise is not actually something you can do. So what I mean by that is exercise, that's like a very nebulous concept. Like that's not actually like an actual action. Walking is an action, lifting weights is an action, swimming is an action, but like exercise is like very nebulous. And it can also be nebulous when you got a bunch of stuff to do in a day. You have a meeting to attend, you have things to pick up, you got to go shopping, you're spending time with your husband or wife or your kids. And so one of the things we can do in terms of helping ourselves be healthier is to translate exercise from this conceptual word down to a very tangible action, and then give it a regular place in our schedule. So for example, one of my coaching clients enjoys doing something called Orange Theory. It's a like workout class thing. And so for what that means for him in a tangible way, turning that into an action he can put in his schedule and do, is that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, he wants to go to the 6 a.m. Orange Theory class, which means needs to get up by 5:30 to get there. And then Saturday at 10:30, he does the later class. And so that can go in his schedule as a recurring event, and it's there and it's a placeholder. And it's not like, I want to work out today, but I haven't really thought about it. I don't know when I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you get to the end of the day, it's 8 o'clock at night, you're tired, and there's no way you're working out then. So it's just like making it tangible. It doesn't have to be extreme. I mean, it could be also like, I walk 3 times a week and I do that at lunch, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because that's when it's light out. And that's what I do. But I encourage people for things like exercise, clarify like what is that actual action you're going to do, and then where can it fit in your schedule as a recurring event. And I'll give you a few other examples of other ways we can make things tangible, and then we can discuss it if there's any ways any of you have found that have been helpful. I of course would love to hear those, or things where maybe you're not quite sure how to make it tangible, and we can talk about that too. So another can be family. So just making sure family is a priority and doing that. That can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different families. It doesn't need to be a one size fits all solution, but for some people, maybe it looks like having family dinner with their spouse or with their kids if they have any children or any of them are at home. Maybe if your kids have all moved out, maybe it looks like having Sunday dinner where you invite over your kids to come if they can on Sundays and to spend time with you. Or like in my family, we live around the country. So for a lot of years, like I guess 22 years now, we do a family conference call. So that is once a week. We call in and we're together it's my 3 siblings and my parents. And we're together for about an hour. We all give little updates on our week, what happened. And it's just a way for us to stay connected. So it's not like you see each other at Thanksgiving. It's like, who are you? What have you been doing for the last 6 months? So it can be helpful, like when you say things like my family is a priority, to just really ask yourself, well, what does that mean? And then how do I translate that into an action? And then how do I get that into my schedule? Because otherwise, like I love my family, they're great. I love my parents, I love my siblings. I would not be calling like all 6 of them, or 5 of them, I guess it would. I'm the 6th. I would be calling all 5 of them every week, but because it's just like a standard thing, we know happens every Monday at 9:30 p.m. It just gets done, and we just stay connected in that way. So that's another example of how we want to clarify action-based priorities. Doesn't have to be one size fits all, but I really think it's a very good idea to make it tangible and get in your calendar. And then I'm going to give you one other idea, and this is depending on kind of where you're at in your career journey. This may or may not be relevant, but for those people that are still working or have a business or anything like that, and maybe networking is important or business development, again, like networking is a generic concept. It's not actually like a thing. So I encourage people, if it's important and it's something you really do need to do for your work or your business, to make that tangible. So whether it's being part of groups like you're part of, showing up at other networking events, like making a goal for yourself that once a week I'll show up at some group event that would introduce me to new people that I wouldn't normally connect with. Whether it's saying every week I will get together with potential contact for coffee and just make sure I'm keeping myself fresh. By making those goals, you can help yourself to again make something that's a priority, something that's action based and that you've got in your calendar. And with the networking example, if you're trying to meet lots of new people and not always do the same thing every week, that could vary in terms of not being the exact same time in your schedule each week. But one thing you can do to make it a system is I highly recommend doing something called weekly planning, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a little later. And during your weekly planning time, you can have a little checklist. And like one of the things on your checklist could be like plan networking events or set up a coffee with potential contact or client. And then you can make that part of your system when you do your weekly planning, that you think through what that's going to look like and you're making that a regular part of your week. So that's kind of the next level. So we talked about dynamic priorities model in terms of how things are interrelated and why some things might be falling off your plate that you actually don't want to fall off your plate. Then action-based priorities is if I have something that I say is a priority, but I'm struggling to actually invest any time in, translate that into something very actionable and get that in my schedule on a recurring basis so it doesn't just fall off my radar because I get busy or tired or just don't think of it. So that's kind of the next step there. And I'd love to hear any thoughts in terms of ways that any of you have done this, like made things tangible, or maybe want to make things a little more tangible after I share this that would help you be more effective. Any thoughts? Everyone's got this perfectly? If you do have it perfectly, it's fine. And also, I apologize for the candy. I was like dealing with a cough a little earlier, so I'm like keeping myself hydrated. So we're good. Okay, so it sounds like we're good on that point, which is just fine. But I do want you to think about if you have something that you say is important, but it's not happening, it's falling over the edge, how can you clarify the action attached to it? And then get that into your schedule, preferably on a recurring basis, so that it's just going to happen automatically. So that is the concept there. And then what I wanted us to do is to then move into, and I also saw there's a few things in the chat. Okay, thanks, Jen. I'm glad you thought my ideas were great. And that's there. So okay, so then the next, and I'll actually give you a few other real little tips on the action-based priorities since we didn't have as much discussion. Some of my coaching clients also found it very helpful to set up specific times with specific family members. So for example, one of my coaching clients had a daughter in high school and she set up like Saturday morning, I don't know if like mommy daughter time. So like they would go to brunch or they'd go shopping or they'd get a pedicure or they'd do something fun together, and just like having that like intentional time for either her and her daughter or her and her husband or whatever it is that they did also was like very helpful in cultivating the relationship. So okay, so that's the next step there in terms of action-based priorities and a way to make sure that things you say are important are in your schedule on a regular basis. Then from there, I'm going to talk about weekly planning and daily planning as tools for you to be able to move ahead consistently what you say is important to you, and also to adapt to anything that might be going on in your schedule that would impact your ability to get things done or things that you need to plan for. So I am a huge advocate of weekly and daily planning. And why this is so important is we want to take a proactive approach instead of a reactive approach to what's happening in our lives. And we also want to have realistic expectations. So a lot of times what can happen is if people just have a very long to-do list and they haven't actually planned out their week or planned out their day, they can think that they're going to get 100 things done in a week. It doesn't happen. And then no matter how hard they work, they just feel like a failure. Like, how did I not get the more things done today? Like, I had all this time, or I'm retired. I should just be able to do everything. But you can't. And so weekly and daily planning kind of gets you down to a concrete level in terms of what you actually can or can't do and how you're going to anticipate things to make things as stress-free as possible. And so what this looks like is, for most people, the most popular times to do weekly planning are Fridays, so like Friday afternoon, sometime on the weekend, like a weekend morning or Sunday evening, or Monday morning. So I'm a Monday morning weekly planning sort of girl, but I have people that do this all different times of the week. And the idea is that weekly planning should take you a little bit longer. It usually takes about 30 to 60 minutes for most of my clients. And during that time, you're looking through the whole universe of ideas of what you could be working on for the week. So for example, you might have a list of things that need to get done for Kiwanis. You might have a list of things that you want to get done around the house. You might have a list of errands you want to do. You could have a list of things that need to get done for work or for your kids, grandkids, trips you want to plan, any of that. I do recommend everyone have some sort of way they record like all the different things that either are their ideas or things that they need to do. The reason is that you just don't need to hold in your head then, and you have a good data set of like what are all the possibilities of how I could be spending my time. So during weekly planning, you're going to look at all those things. So just look at everything, get a real clear lay of the land of what is actually most important for the next 7 days. And what are the things where it can wait? Like it needs to get done, doesn't need to get done now. And there's not really like time in your schedule for it. So that's what we're trying to do there. And then in terms of the mechanics of it, how people do weekly planning is you typically will look back over the previous week. I like to do this with my Google Calendar. You don't have to do it that way. You could do a paper calendar or any other way you like, but I'll put my Google Calendar in week view from Monday to Sunday is how I structure it. I flip back, I look over the previous week. I see what happened. I see, is there like something that I did where I need to do a follow-up? Like, do I need to send a proposal or do some other kind of follow-up to what happened? And if so, make sure I have that marked for the coming week. I also see if there's anything I thought I would get done, but I didn't get done. So for whatever reason, I had it in my schedule, but didn't quite happen as I hoped. Then I'm going to move that forward to the coming week and see what's there. The idea is you just don't want things to fall through the cracks where you don't realize like, oh, I had that thing to follow up on or do, and you didn't do it. Then what I do is I look ahead over the coming week. So when you're doing that, that's a way to just anticipate anything that might be coming up that you want to prepare for. So it could be, I don't know, it could be something like you have a doctor's appointment, like you have an eye doctor's appointment and you want to coordinate with your spouse to make sure that they can drive you because you're getting your eyes dilated. So it could be something like that. It could be that you have a birthday party for a family member coming up and you need to make sure that you buy a present or a Saturday so it's not awkward and you show up without a present. It could be you have a networking event where you're meeting someone for coffee and haven't clarified yet exactly where that place is. So all those things you're going to look ahead and you're going to prep. And that is part of making life not stressful because it's not like you're about to leave your eye doctor appointment and then you realize your wife went to get her hair cut and that's just not going to work. Or you didn't buy the present and now you're like trying to scramble to the store right before you show up. So this is our way of anticipating what's happening and putting time in our schedule in advance so it's not stressful. And so we do that, we look ahead, and then like I said, you're going to look over all the possibilities of the different things you could be working on for the week, and then really narrow it down to what you're going to do this week. And then I recommend, if at all possible, you actually block it into your schedule. So let's say you have a big event coming up for Kiwanis. It's going to take you months to plan, but you can't do the months of planning in 1 week, but you can definitely move forward on things within a week. So perhaps you look over the list of things and you decide, okay, the most important thing this week is really locking down a location. We really need to make sure that we've got a good place that will fit all the people we need and be in the right location. And so you might put down your goal for the week is that you're going to research into the top 5 places in the area and reach out and contact all of them and see if they might be available on the date that you're hoping to do your event on. And then so you're like, okay, that's what I'm going to do to move forward on this event this week. And then you find a time in your schedule when you see that you're open, plop that in. So then when you get to that time, maybe it's Tuesday at 2 p.m. It's like, okay, well, I want to move ahead on this week. This is my goal. And it's Tuesday at 2 p.m. and I put that in. And so I'm going to move that forward and make progress on that. And this can help with overwhelm. So you're not like, oh, I got to do this and this and that. And all this stuff have to happen for the event to happen. You just narrow it down to what you're going to do this week, move it forward. And then the next week you pick the next thing to focus on and move forward. And I got married this last summer in June. And this was a lifesaver for me because we had a 6-month engagement. So it was a rather short engagement. So planning a whole wedding in 6 months if I had not done this and like narrowed down, like I'm only doing these things this week, my brain would have fried because there's so many different things you could do all at once. And by just like narrowing it down, making it clear, plotting it in, we got married, everything went fine, and my brain didn't fry, and I'm still standing. So, so yeah, so that's basically how weekly planning works in terms of narrowing things down, looking at your whole universe of possibilities, and then really deciding what it is you're going to do this week, potting that in, and then also deciding what you're not going to do. So you're getting the location in place, but maybe you're not going to worry about catering this week, not going to worry about the invitations. You're just focusing on this one thing in front of you. And then, so weekly planning will take you more time. But then if you've done that well, then daily planning will be a lot easier, still necessary, but a lot easier. And this goes into Dennis's point about the fact, even when you've set what you think your priorities are, that they are dynamic on a day-to-day basis. So it's not like no one's going to email you, no one's going to ask you for anything, nothing new is going to come into your world. You know, you might have a kid that gets sick, or you might, I don't know, have to take a trip to the doctor for some random reason, or anything might happen. And so daily planning is how we adjust and recalibrate to make sure that we stay on track. The most common times to do that are right at the beginning of your day. So maybe like after you have breakfast, when you start work, the end of your work day, if you're retired, that could be before dinner, um, or right before bed. And the idea is, if you've done your weekly planning well, where you looked at your whole universe of ideas, really narrowed it down to what you want to do this week, then your daily planning should just be little tweaks. So for example, I do my daily planning in the morning. When I do that, I look over the prior day, see if there's anything that maybe I started writing an article and I didn't finish it, something like that. I see if there's something that I need or want to move to the next day. Then I look over the current day and just make sure everything's still up to date. So for example, today I had a few clients that had to reschedule their coaching calls. And so I had my schedule calls, and then I had some people that got rescheduled to different days. And then you just determine that what you had planned to do in between meetings is still the best and most accurate things to do. And then you go get them. So I usually find that takes about 5 to 10 minutes. In terms of the mechanics behind that, you can do that digitally. You can leave things in your digital calendar. I find for myself that although I really like to do my weekly planning and keep track of my tasks digitally, I do that all in Google Calendar because I have a very meeting driven schedule. I find that my daily planning, I love to do on paper. So there's just something that's nice about, I physically write out like 10 a.m. meeting, 11 a.m. meeting, all that stuff. And then I write next to it, I write what the follow-up will be. So for example, most of my clients, I'm going to end up sending them something I call an action guide, and then also a Google Calendar invite afterwards. So right next to the time of their meeting, their name, I then put AGGC, standing for like action guide in Google Calendar. So then I don't cross their name off my list until I know I've sent that follow-up. And so that's my way of making sure, like, as I'm going throughout the day, I'm keeping track of like, okay, I just had a meeting, what needs to happen, how can I move that forward? And even if you're retired and maybe not working yet, you still, like your Kiwanis meetings or other meetings you might have, you could meet with people, but then maybe you need to send them a follow-up email, or you need to research something or do a call, or there's some sort of action item. So you can have that listed on your daily plan and make sure that you either get that recorded somewhere so you do it later, or you just get that done that day before you wrap up for the day. So that's what I recommend in terms of weekly and daily planning, to take things from the conceptual, I want to do this, to the actual reality of your day-to-day life. And that's also where you can make adjustments to your routine. So maybe you usually are going to do your exercise at 6 a.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, like one of my clients, but you're traveling on Tuesday. So you adjust it so you're exercising Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or something like that. So it's your opportunity to make sure everything stays in place. So those are some concepts in terms of how you can bring this into practical, tangible action. And I'm happy to hear anyone's thoughts in terms of what's worked well for them or what might be hard for them with weekly or daily planning, and also just general time management questions. I'm open to, because Lynette said to leave some time at the end for comments and questions. So there you go. Yeah, Dennis, please feel free to share.
I guess what comes to mind, and I apologize, I was guilty while you were talking a little bit too, but in today's Zoom and with people, what they think is important, multitasking during Zoom
Mhm.
and may or may not be able to pay total attention to the speakers or to the program. And, I'm thinking back in all the positions I've held in management prior to Zoom, I can't remember not giving a speaker full attention.
Mhm.
And it seems like we've gotten away from that. Does that enter into any of your time management discussions with clients?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a great question. I, so there's a few different things going on there. So one is I think it depends on part of it depends on like the context. So if it's a work meeting and you're supposed to be actively engaged, or like let's say a committee meeting or that sort of thing, I think it is important to like give your full attention, because even if you think you're totally pay attention, you're probably not. So that can happen. And so I think if it is something where you need to be fully engaged, you have a participating role, it's a good idea to be on video, to pay full attention and to be present in there. If you're in a situation where you're feeling like you don't feel like you can be fully engaged, I think there's a few questions to ask yourself. So one is, should you even be on the meeting? So like if you can't really be there, if you can't really pay attention, if you can't really participate, is this that high a priority to you? And the answer may be like, no, it's like not a super high priority, in which case maybe you shouldn't come. So that's one thing. I'm not saying you definitely shouldn't come, but it's just like a question to ask yourself. Like, if I'm not willing to really give this my time fully, maybe this isn't the highest priority. I know sometimes, and depending on the work culture, there can be a lot of FYI meetings that people end up in, where maybe there's 100 people on a call and about 5 minutes of the call is relevant to you. And the other 55 minutes is like them talking about some updates on something else that has nothing to do with your department or something like that. So in those cases where you're required to be on a call, but very little of it is actually relevant, and then we're talking about like work context, I'm okay with people multitasking during the part that's not relevant, because that's just, you know, politics, office stuff that needs to happen. And then I think there are some cases where I think it's actually fine for people to not give things their maybe 100% attention. And I think it's okay. So like, for example, as you probably all know, we have election season coming up, and I'm volunteering on a candidate's campaign. And so they have these Sunday night Zoom calls that are usually about 30 minutes of content, but then can sometimes go an hour long in terms of people asking random questions. And so I want to be on there because I am volunteering and I want to be aware of what I'm supposed to be doing and where. But particularly during the last 30 minutes and it's a statewide campaign. It's a statewide campaign. So during the last 30 minutes when people are maybe asking questions about what's happening in Muskegon or Traverse City or like counties I'm not even in and things don't impact me, um, I think it's completely fine. I'm like, I'm on there, I'm listening, but like not fully engaged. And so I think there can be a whole range of things for that. But I would say if something is really important to you personally or professionally, we should be fully present. That also includes even when it's not Zoom, like when we're in person with people, having our phones away. I know that can be an issue for a lot of people. So just having your phone somewhere else. And if you're feeling like, oh, I can't possibly not multitask, really ask yourself in your dynamic priorities model, what do I need to cut out? Because clearly I'm trying to take on too much if I think it's impossible for me to sit and have dinner with my family without being on my phone. Or I think it's impossible to attend an important meeting where I'm supposed to be participating and not be fully there. And so I think it kind of depends on the situation, but people should be like discerning about what they're doing there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was a great question. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, Jim Donahue, Kiwanis, Richmond. Our club is pushing Zoom as far into the background as we can push it. We are meeting in person. Our committees are meeting in person. Our club satellite is meeting in person. Our key clubs and advisors are meeting in person. And every and everybody is focused on what the point of the meeting is.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
as a matter of fact, we had 2 weeks, we meet every Monday with a speaker, and we had our room was packed with 80 people 2 weeks
Wow.
ago for the luncheon meeting.
Oh.
And we continue to live stream it for a handful or so people who either can't make the meeting or for various reasons. And we will continue to do that. But the push is really to get together in person and to take care of the business of Kiwanis.
Yeah, no, that's a
In
great point.
person.
Yeah, maybe it just don't have Zoom for certain things, because it does create a different dynamic when you're just all in the same room. There's things you would never do when you're all in the same room that people would do on Zoom. And also, but also I will have to say there are some things that are more comfortable in person than on Zoom. Like, so for example, it would be totally normal in a normal meeting, to maybe just even not in an awkward way or rude way, but just like shift in your chair, like so you're a little more comfortable. Like we're on Zoom, you're like, okay, I have to sit right in the center of this video screen so you can get a sore back or something. So there are some just like natural ways you can move or be a human being and not get a sore back when you're in
One
person versus on Zoom.
one interesting things, because also our executive committee is meeting in person and our board is meeting in person. And our executive secretary made this rather simple applause line at our most recent October board meeting. And she said, finally, I can get the name of who made the motion and who seconded the motion. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Small deal, but it was in her keeping the official record, it was very important to her.
yeah, no, that's great. And just because we have technology doesn't mean we have to use it or that it's better.
Yeah.
Like we don't necessarily need to make it the extreme of like Amish or Mennonite, but they do kind of have a point of they really question, like, just because this is here, does that mean it's actually making our culture or society better? Is it actually like in the name of efficiency, or do we actually have effectiveness? And are we actually creating the kind of community that we want to have? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And so that's a great point, Jim, of it's okay to just say we're not doing things on Zoom. Any other comments or questions? I'm happy to take them, but no pressure either way.
I have a
Elizabeth,
question.
Go, Jen.
What do you prefer, Elizabeth, to use when you're managing your your priority list? Do you use some sort of software, calendar, written book? What do you like to use?
Yep, great question. So when I am managing my to-do list, I like to keep my to-dos within Google Calendar. So Google Calendar has the ability to create tasks. And because I do all my weekly planning within Google Calendar, I just like to have them all in the same place. So that's what I do personally. But I see a huge range in terms of what clients do. So some clients will use like their Outlook tasks or Google tasks to do their task list. Other people will use task management tools like Todoist or Things or other tools like that. Some people keep them in paper. So there isn't really a right or wrong way to do that. The most important thing is that you pick something that you're committed to and that you'll regularly put things in and check. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is to constantly switch tools. And so you're not checking it and you're not putting them in the same one, or to just try to keep everything in your head. So those are two things I do not recommend. But beyond that, I've seen all kinds of systems work.
Thank you. I was just curious. I tend to use reminders through Apple, and I'm just wondering if there was a better thing out there.
Yeah, well, there's not really, like I said, it's not really right or wrong. So if reminders is working for you and you like it, then it's completely fine to keep using it. So, and did you have something to say, Lynette?
I had a question for you. How many times do you move a task from one day, or do you move it from one day to the next?
Mhm.
if it doesn't get done one day? And then how many times before you say, I don't have the right task or this task
Got
isn't
it.
right?
Yeah, so I would say it is very frequent for me to move at least one task to another day. I would say most days I'm moving at least one thing. Um, the way I look at it is if you have like an 85, 90% batting average on your daily plan, you're probably doing pretty well. Because things can take longer than expected or come up or any of those sorts of things. And I really try to plan ahead so that I'm not doing things last minute. So if something moves, it's not a stressful situation to have to move it. So I would say most days I do move something to a different day. I don't really see that as a problem though, because it's a way of like if I made my schedule so doable that I never had to move anything, I'm probably missing out on some productivity there. Like you're not even like attempting to have a stretch goal. So I'm completely fine with that. And then in terms of great question about, should I even be doing this at all? That is something that I think I actually, to be completely transparent, I think I need to ask myself more because there are some things that I do keep moving, and it's might be similar to your situation where you said, "Oh, I thought my volunteer responsibilities were going down, and then they actually increased." And so think I have a few things on my task list where it's like, "Oh, it's gonna get more chill in this time, and then I'll get these random things done that I was expecting to do, and it hasn't gotten more chill for various reasons." So I think I need to ask myself that question more often. But there definitely are times when I say, you know what, I haven't made this a priority, continually not made it a priority. I'm just deleting it or not doing it, and it's probably fine. So yeah, that was a great question. And anything else before we wrap up? Yeah.
How do you factor in surprises?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, one of the things I do is I definitely try to, well, a few things. One is I work on things in advance. So, for example, I had when I work with a new client, one-on-one, I put together something that I call a weekly schedule for them, where it takes me a few hours and I lay out in Excel all the different parts of their schedule. I had a client that I had that call with him this last Tuesday, and I knew my next coaching call with him was Monday. So I needed to make sure within that time span I had his schedule done. I did have some time this afternoon, and I knew I had a little time Friday afternoon also. So technically, I could have been like, oh, I'll just stick his working on a schedule one of those days. But Wednesday is my project day where I don't do coaching calls. And I was like, no, I am not going to slot this into my schedule for Friday afternoon. And then some surprise happens, or some call takes longer than expected, or something else comes up. And then all of a sudden, his schedule was not done for him on Monday. So instead, I did it on Wednesday. I did get it, I put it in for Wednesday, got it done Wednesday. But if for some reason I hadn't, I still had Thursday and Friday as a backup. And so I think that's part of how I handle surprises. I just plan in a lot of margin. I try not to get myself up against a wall. And then secondly, I don't make a lot of firm commitments to people unless they're absolutely needed. So for example, I write for a Harvard Business Review and I write for Fast Company regularly, usually Fast Company about once a month and Harvard Business Review about once every 2 months. I rarely, well, sometimes my Fast Company editor will give me a deadline and then I'll follow that for sure. But like my Harvard Business Review editor usually does not give me a deadline and I don't tell her one. So that means I put it in my calendar. I do get articles written for her. I do intend to get them done. I'm not like a procrastinator. But the thing is that you become more stressed when you start setting expectations. So if I set the expectation, oh, I'll have this to you by the 20th, then some things come up. Like I had a whole bunch of new clients that signed up last week. And then all of a sudden I have these schedules to make. Well, what if all of a sudden I don't have that time to write that article? So I don't give her a deadline. I just put in my calendar. I know when I think I want to work on it. And if I need to move it, I do. And so that's part of how I kind of don't allow the surprises to throw me off because I plan in margin and I don't create expectations that are unnecessary expectations. So yeah, got it. And
Anyone else have questions for Elizabeth?
those were some great questions, by the
Those
way.
were great questions.
Yeah, yeah, really, really good. So yeah, and it's okay if you don't. We're about at time, so we're good.
Anyone else? I don't see anything. Elizabeth, do
Okay.
you?
I don't, so I think we're good.
I think we are. Elizabeth, this has been fascinating, and I'm so, so appreciative and so thankful that
You're
you took
welcome.
time out of your schedule to do this for me. Thank you. Thank you.
You're
thank you, thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad it could work out. I hope it was helpful. And yeah, sometimes something will just stick in your mind and you'll be like, oh, that's the missing key to how to fit in that thing that I have not been able to do. So I hope that's helpful for you. And this is a journey, it's a lifestyle. So every day we just get up and try again. So there you go.
Yeah. Awesome.
Elizabeth, I have to say that my 12-year-old is here listening in on your talk, and I think she wants a talk on time management for middle school.
Oh, well, similar principles. She still needs to do her weekly and daily planning. So sounds good. Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was great. And if you want to check out my books, I have written 3. So Elizabeth Grace Saunders, you can find them there. Well, if you search for that name, my books will pop up. And then my website is realife.com. So REALLIFE and then another e.com. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was probably more adventurous than sitting on a campaign program right now.
Yes. Yes. So it was good.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank
Sounds
you.
Thanks,
good.
Lynette.
Okay. Have a
Yes,
great night,
thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.